Welcome to a special edition of the IFBTA's Meet Our Member Series. And I'm really pleased to have with me today Nick Belsito, who's the Vice President of Sales for NCR Voyix. But actually, we're in Scottsdale right now at RLC, and a lot has happened actually with NCR Voyix. So that's really what we're here to talk about. So I'm not sure which one we do first. And which areas are you working in?
So we're working in emerging brands, so emergent enterprise. So I think there's been a systematic shift in the industry. If you think of traditional players in tech, they think of SMB sales versus enterprise sales. But if you think about a tech stack of a brand, the single unit operator has a fundamentally different challenge than a 30 unit operator, and it's different than a 1,000 unit operator. How do we bring these enterprise tools that 1,000 or 10,000 unit brand uses down to a 10 or 50 or 100 unit location? Right? Fundamental different needs, but it can accelerate them. So I'm super excited on the shift.
Well, first of all, you're working, so from what I got that you just said, you're working in a very exciting area because it's not, and you said emergent, not necessarily emerging, right? Because these brands are able to do it. But the other thing that I picked out of that is you're talking about how to take some of the new tools that are available today and make them available as people are emerging and emergent, because they can go global in a second too, right? So there's a lot within that. So that's not only a shift when you said you wanted to create like a startup within the company, but, NCR Voyix itself has, repositioned itself and what it's doing. And, I think about when people put it together and they talk about things, you're not really a legacy brand. You are a brand that's out there doing some really cool stuff. But I don't know everybody knows that.
No, I mean, look, we're a 140-year-old company, right? And I think that's actually our strong suit. We have 140 years of history of building some of the best technology in the world. We started in Dayton, Ohio, and Patterson actually created the book on how to sell.
I have that book.
You have the book?
I do.
All right.
And you actually have one of the first cash registers too, sitting in my office.
It's really impressive. Yeah,
I do.
I grew up when I was 12. My dad opened up a deli in Worcester, Massachusetts, and it's still going strong. And calling his sick from school to work the register, and he had the old school register 20, 30 years ago. You press in the dials on there, you get in the cash in. But we've gone under a significant transformation. The past couple of years, we have a brand new CEO, Jim Kelly, who actually founded a payments company, multi-billion-dollar payments company, sold that, joined our board, and is now our CEO. Miguel Solares, who's our CRO, is on the founded team of SciComm, an enterprise point-of-sale system. Nick East, who's our chief product officer, actually founded an edge-based microservices platform, point-of-sale, in the retail side, who's now the chief product officer over both restaurant and retail. So there's been a systematic shift. We previously had a banking division. We sold the banking division, separated, and now we focus exclusively on retail and hospitality. So we're building verticalized software to satisfy the industry, and we're turning us into a billion-dollar startup. We're moving faster than ever. We're injecting AI, agentic AI, throughout the entire stack from that standpoint, and we can leverage, Aloha is a 30-year-old system that has a significant number of patents throughout the product, and it does more than any other product does out there. So when you inject that kind of energy into a company that's been around 140 years, with the expertise and the brain knowledge that we have and the data scientists, we have the most brilliant people on earth that have solved really bespoke issues for these mega enterprise customers as well as a single unit operator. So if you take that entire rich history, what we're doing is creating the next generation point of sale, and it's leapfrogging the industry, and nobody else can do that.
So I know a little bit about this.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put some words in your mouth.
I love it.
And let's just go ahead and talk about that. So some key things. So 140-year-old brand. Yeah. Okay. With a lot of legacy and a lot of history in there, although I'm going to use legacy in this case in a very positive manner here. But
look, I love legacy. Our competitors use the word legacy to kind of use it against us. But what that means is we've been around. So if you're a brand that's growing and scaling, we know how to scale you. We're not discovering for the first time.
Well, that's exactly the point. Yeah. That the industry very well. Actually, you wrote the book on the industry and really understand what food service is about, the restaurant industry is about. Yeah. But you also said the word retail. And I need to just point out that the convergence of retail and hospitality are like so close, right? And then here are the additional pieces. Global, in there, working from the independent all the way up to the large scale enterprise, however that's defined. But the one thing that I find interesting is you're talking about like, AI and agentic and some of the terms that everybody's talking about. Yeah. But really what I think we're talking about is a platform.
Yes.
And it's not about the cash register. It's about a platform that's on there, right?
Correct. Look, I think point of sale is one component of that. So if you think about a point of sale, everybody wants to use the word AI, right? I actually built an AI platform when people thought I was saying ET. So people kind of learn, what does that mean? For us, when you think about point of sale, we really talked about the platform. And what the platform means is we're developing an operating system, the restaurant operating system. The same way you think about iOS on your iPhone or Android on your Samsung, we are building the restaurant operating system. It's a fundamental different shift. Everybody else is building most likely a cloud-based Android system that's monolithic. What does that mean? What that means in the simplest sense is that if you make an update to your loyalty service, you have to regression test across your entire stack. And if you have one conflict, it can take down your entire point of sale. I had a conversation with someone in a cloud-based point of sale that happened.
There are stories that's happened, and that's one of the things that people didn't think about, right?
Yeah, if you have a cloud storage, you have an impact there. You're running a resiliency mode instead of redundancy. What does that mean? You're really stuck and limited to that one specific terminal to do cash forwarding. What are we doing that's different? We're creating an entire microservices-based edge infrastructure technology. What that means is, think of every single service you run on a point of sale, your tax service, your loyalty service, your catalog, your menu, anything throughout that point of sale journey becomes its own independent service. So if one of those have an issue, you can still deploy and still operate in full operational mode inside your restaurant, and it would auto self-heal. So think of like Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram running on your phone.
Right.
If Twitter has an issue and it kills and dies on your phone, it doesn't impact Facebook or Instagram. You can reopen that and it opens up and your entire phone works. With us, if you have a similar issue on the point of sale, we'll auto self-heal that, have it boot up, and the front of house would have no idea that any of that ever happened. It also gives you full observability, which is huge. Even if you have 30 restaurants, obviously if you have 10,000 restaurants, observability is huge. But even at 30, you're growing. You want to know, are you up? Because if you're not up, you're not making money. You want to know if any of your peripherals are unplugged. You want to know, are they secure? So how do you create a digital twin of your store in real time? That's what we're providing, which is fundamentally different than any other technology out there.
So if we add to that and we think about it, though, what we're talking about is within the restaurant ecosystem, but there's a lot more connected parts and pieces to it, right?
Yeah.
And so when I think about what you guys were showing, like at NRF and retail, you're really showing connected store. You're showing all the different pieces. The part that I think you bring to the table that may be different is a lot of people are building, maybe we'll call it like an all-in-one platform, but that platform really is a all-in-one like 4-box platform, right? Yeah. And so how do you connect? You're helping the smaller person all the way up to larger one connect also all the parts and pieces that they operate inside the 4 walls, but also outside the 4 walls.
We processed 1.4 trillion transactions annually, right? Across 35 countries. I can't name another point of sale that has that type of scope or reach. In doing so, you have to provide APIs and a modern infrastructure that enables other technologies to integrate, whether it's our service, a third party, and we have a lot of brands that like to build and develop their own services. So our platform, what does the platform mean? We can bring the point of sale, we can bring the loyalty, we are a payment processor, we can do back office. So we have all of these things.
But they also can use what they have,
they
right?
They can use what they have.
That's the idea.
They can
Build on a platform, right?
Build a best-in-breed product that enables you to run your business, right? So do we have products that we think are better? Absolutely. Are there products that are spoke to what you build that you think is best for your business? Absolutely. We'll partner. We'll make sure that works, that operates, and it always runs. Those integrations won't break the transactions happening in the store. And from an innovation standpoint, we have one of the world's leading self-checkouts. When you think about retail and a lot of the products there, you're seeing a lot of retails open restaurants within their 4 walls. You're seeing a lot of restaurants selling retail gear within their 4 walls.
It's one of the biggest opportunities out there. Yeah. And when people start talking about how they're going, you talk about smaller footprint, you go to the airport, you see things, you see self-checkout that's there. That's where the expertise actually of tying retail with food service come together.
Yeah.
And then you start to think about all the different environments that, we operate in between the colleges, the universities, the airports. That's where that knowledge and also the platform being built. But I also believe what you've said is if somebody wants a best of breed, or an all-in-one, they can get both, right? Choose it which way you want to go because you're building on the platform, right?
We'll simplify. So if you want simplification, cost reduction, but we still believe we have best-in-breed technology, right? but we recognize you might have built out your entire stack around other integration partners. So
people are not going to replace everything overnight.
No, and that's a challenge, right? So if you have 1,000 stores or 100 stores or 30 stores, let's do a deploy out on the point of sale, and then we can pick and replace the product lines that you want to remove from those services. So think of each one of those integrations as an independent service. So we call them microservices. So every single aspect can connect to our APIs. And by the way, we have in-store APIs. So if you have a kiosk or you have Vision AI or Voice AI, you want to operate that, you don't have to jump to the cloud and back down to inject an order in or to pull a menu catalog. That can all operate on our stack, in our infrastructure, in our edge services.
Which means that if the cloud goes down, you have one of those service interruptions, right? No, seriously. I mean, that's what we're talking about is I don't know. I'm trying to think of what it should be called, right? We can come up with a marketing term for this, but like the cloud in store and then the cloud out of store, right?
Well, so the way so you think of a server, right? People think of legacy technology. We actually are bringing the servers back, but in a serverless way. You actually don't need a server in the back room. It can run on the terminal. The terminal also doesn't increase in size. You can have a very modern looking terminal like you see in the point of sale world. And that's where we're running on the edge. And what that also means, aside from the internet going down, speed. That transaction that's going to go from that kiosk or from that voice AI or from that vision can go inject directly locally into the point of sale, into the KDS. You can route it to the right locations. What does that mean? You're going to have happier guests because they're going to have a better service experience. You're going to have happier employees because their lives are easier operationally.
And you're going to give them the information that they need to run their unit, but also to work across the board, because nobody really wants to go into something that's difficult to work in either, right? It should be intuitive.
It should be intuitive and easy to use. So I actually interviewed Tom Frank, the late Tom Frank, who founded PF Chang's, one of the founders of PF Chang's. And the story sticks with me because he told me you can taste smiles in your food. What does that mean? If your employees are just a little bit happier, right? That means it's going to get into the bag a little bit more accurately. They're going to make sure it's packaged properly. It's going to be a little bit more efficient. When they talk to that guest and they're going to be a human, they might have a smile on their face. And at the end of the day, when you're receiving that food, obviously you want the food to be great and have good quality, but you also think about the experience. We're human beings, right? We interact with people and we navigate off people's aura. And that's going to lead to a more positive experience from that standpoint. So what are we doing? We're making it easier for you to run your business. Frictionless and accelerate new possibilities for you. So if you have an idea, we can bring it to life. We have a brand that wanted us to auto fire the kitchen using Vision AI.
So hang on a second.
Sure.
So at the beginning of the year, before year starts, I always have conversations with people about what are going to be the key terms they're talking about. Now, quite frankly, I think that AI is the old term that we were talking about. But frictionless comes up a lot. But you actually said another term, which is actually great. A few years ago, people talked about speed of service.
Yeah.
You just used the word, accelerate in here. It is about speed of service, but you have to accelerate your business in here. So you have frictionless, which is going to make it easier to operate guests, employees, management. But accelerating your business, things are moving so quick and you have to be able to pivot on that. And I think that's actually a great term to be using for right now.
Yeah. So you need your systems to talk to each other. And if you make a decision downstream to replace one of your services, it needs to be plug and play and ready to go. So being on our platform, what that means is I can plug and go and replace my loyalty service, my marketing service, and it's going to instantly jump into the fold and just work out of the box, right? So that stress of integration goes away. The stress of everything just working goes away. Because when you're making decisions at the speed you need to make decisions nowadays with presumably less resources, a lot of people are being asked to do more with less than ever before. So how do you make it easier for the people that run and operate the business, whether they're at a corporate location or inside the store? It has to just work. It has to be easy, and you have to love the products that you use and work with.
Well, there's a couple of things that sort of come to mind as we talk about this, and maybe we can just sort of focus on a couple of those subjects. But we're in a marketplace. Not only do we have emerging brands that might be all corporate owned at 40 units, 50 units, they go internationally to do this, but the whole franchise and licensing, which are two different things, right? Mm-hmm. So how does this impact them when you're talking about a franchisee model or a licensing model? Because they're sometimes the hardest ones to get up and be on the system.
So we have probably the best and world-class navigating franchisor models. Most point of sales are built from a single location, and they're trying to build and grow up to scale to enterprise. We have the unique capabilities. We actually built from the single location, but also the top down, working with the largest brands of the world and converging down. So we understand the journey where you need to be to support your franchisees. What does that mean? Menu hierarchies are super critical, right? You have to have hierarchies to understand your menus, your pricing,
right?
The LTOs. This store might want to sell hot dogs. You don't have it on the menu, but do you want to allow your franchisee to do that or not? So you have a lot of different SKUs. You have a lot of inventory management from that standpoint. You have franchisee fees. So how do you support your franchisees in an accelerated way? In addition to that, what does that mean? You need support. We actually have a global support team that handles level 1, level 2, level 3 support. We can be your wall-to-wall services from soup to nuts. We can take all your calls, siphon that through, and take care of everything. We can be your hardware maintenance. You want to have next calendar day or next business day deploy.
Are you like reading my mind? Because I was going to ask you the next question. So keep going.
Okay. Yeah,
you're doing.
Look, if you're a franchisee and you're, worst case example, you have an employee that is no longer working with you, take the terminal and throw it against the wall. You need a new terminal. How are you going to get that? You need that next day or same day. What is the SLA that you need? We can meet that. And nobody else has that type of reach around the world. So those are different things as you think of as you scale from a franchisor model. How am I going to support them? Because it introduces new complexities, but how do I take those problems off my plate with a brand that has done that before and understands how to scale? In addition to menu management is huge. How do I manage my back office? If I want to say in the Northeast region in Boston, because we issued a new tax in Massachusetts, you want to go up 2%. You can use agentic AI to say, hey, all of my New England locations, I want to go up by 2% across the board on my sale price. But Uber Eats and DoorDash, I want to go up $1 on DoorDash and 10% on Uber Eats. Traditionally, you're going to have to go through every single one of those items, manage that, schedule that, deploy. What if you could just type that in through an agentic AI and use a prompt-based issue just to do that, and it automatically does everything for you, forward scheduling as well. You don't have to plan a deploy where everyone's up at 4 a.m. to make sure it works. It's all pre-programmed, scheduled deploy, and you just review it. And everything just works, right? So
and it works in plain English.
Works in plain English.
No, seriously.
Or Spanish or Chinese or Mandarin, right?
Well, that's right.
We work in a lot of different languages as well, which is really unique. A lot of the staff that you have that work there, how do you flip easily on your terminal in your KDS to another language that your staff, English might be their second language. Most cases it may be. So how do you make systems that can easily operate in a multitude of languages, right? Whether that's French, it could be, a number of languages. So we support a tremendous amount of languages, cultures, countries, items. We've been around for a long time.
And you really actually understand all the different pieces. I don't want it to be lost, though, that, when I used to do consulting, I would always tell people, lead with, your software first, get your functions and features. Then you would look at hardware. It's got to run on something. And then you'd look at the services that surround you because you have all kinds of systems, right? And what you have pointed out is another differentiating point, for NCR Voyix, which is that this is not all or nothing. A person can already be half installed with something, and it doesn't mean they're going to throw it out. They may transition over time, but you have the services to wrap around whether it's your product or not, because we all know it's a single ecosystem, right?
Yeah.
And you've got the consulting group, the help desk that you talked about. You also have hardware platforms that are out there running, on all kinds of different products. But I do think that the new thing is what we're really talking about. And, the word platform used to sort of scare me when we were talking about platform because nobody understood what it was. But what you're talking about is something to build on and connect to.
And I think the other aspect is, I think at the end of the day, we're people, right? I grew up in the industry. I understand. I have a large network. Our team members have large networks with other individuals. We literally have brands that want to tap into the drive-through space and have never done that before. How do you build a drive-through? They leverage us and our expertise to say, this is how we think you should optimize the drive-through. And what we do is we partner on the same side of the table. Here's the things you should think about. This is what you need from a headset system. This is what you need for your bump outs. This is how each of those aspects, this is what one behind means. So all the different technology stack within there will help and partner to help solution for them for a future growth problem. If they want to reduce the format of their box, it might be a 2,000 square foot restaurant. They want to go down to 800 square feet. How does that work? I could be a brand that I grew to 50 units. which has its own set of challenges, and I'm corporate. I want franchisees. We'll make introductions to potential franchisees for you, right? And like the challenges from 1 to 50 is one level.
It's a partnership, but just really
500.
more like being in a family. You know, I mean,
Yeah.
seriously, you're treated as one of the family there, and you're really helping them to grow their business. And you're talking about making introductions, you know, to franchises. You can really only do that if you understand the industry.
Yeah.
You know, and that I think is really sort of a differentiating point
These
here.
are lifelong relationships, right? People are they're not buying shoes. You're making a 5-10 year buying decision. The decision you make very well could be cost you your job or not. And it's a small industry. As big as the industry is, it's also small, and people talk and people know each other. So I think like your word matters, right? Your integrity matters, and who you are and what you say and what you stand behind and what you believe in. And like what we're building, you know, I joined NCR Voyix just about a year ago. I founded 2 different AI companies, past 15 years, been out restaurant technology, started out in defense contracting, been around like really groundbreaking technology. And I started to see under the hood what we were building.
Well, you're not just seeing under the hood, you're helping to drive it forward.
Now we're helping to drive it forward.
You're actually translating what people need because you actually understand that conversation, right?
Yeah, and the technology component and the team we have is best in class. It's something I've never seen before. So it's really exciting to see what we can deliver to the market and execute, right? You have to execute on what you say you're going to do. So I'm incredibly excited for the future of where we're going to be. And if you're a brand out there that wants to leapfrog your technology, take it to the next level, you know, we'd love to partner and talk.
So if you think about this a little bit with all of the touch points that you have in the industry.
Yeah.
So I know you're not going to tell me exactly what's going on in the lab, you know, at the lab. However, where do you see actually the trends going, and where are you focusing? Where are you directing the team to focus? Because you're really sitting there in the middle with the touch points of the people in the field, and then how you have to develop the next generation. And with your background, you know, I mean, you have the ideal background in all of the different areas. So, you know, where do you see it really going?
So what we're seeing is slight nuance in the different groups, but how do we simplify the tech stack? How do we make it easier for you to run your business, right? And how do we, people have a lot of ideas now. What large language models and AI have done is people have a lot of great ideas on what they want to build. How do we partner with you to bring that to life? So we're seeing a really lot of innovation.
Accelerate it. I'm not forgetting the word accelerate.
In addition to accelerate, but actually bring it to life, right?
Okay.
How do I bring something more than a prototype? So one is simplification and innovation. The other is cost consolidation. Cost is on everyone's mind nowadays, right? So the ability for our software can run on a multitude of hardware. Would I love to sell you my hardware? Absolutely. Could you keep the hardware stack that you're on? Very well likely. So you have the opportunity to leapfrog your existing technology, but without a significant capital expenditure up front. How do we also enable your team members to do more with less? You know, if you're a 30-unit brand, your first hire might have been a marketing person that you said also owns IT, or vice versa. They're doing a multitude of roles, right? And then as you move up the stack, you have huge teams that might be just on marketing or just on IT. How do they talk between
It's interesting because it's not a finance play anymore in the IT area. It's really comes to a combination of, you know, the chief digital officer, right?
Yeah,
it's a marriage of marketing and IT, even more so than finance, even though you're
the data is
numbers,
huge, right? So it's not just a matter of, okay, can I get my data out of the system? Like, yes. How do I leverage that data? How to receive that data in a format that makes it very easy for me to build dashboards on myself, execute that data for marketing real time. You might want to make an LTO decision. You might be using that in your kitchen innovation, right? What is happening on my cost of goods sales? What items to sell in certain trend markets? And that might lead to a new kitchen innovation to utilize the existing inventory you have on hand that might go to waste sooner to bring that to market.
Do you get those aha moments internally when you take a look at just maybe homogeneous data that's being, or consolidated data? Or are there some aha moments you guys get that yourselves by having all of these different touch points and data?
So I think that's one of the things I love. So when I go to Atlanta and be at GHQ, I kind of go up and down the floors, and we have just really, I call them like whiteboard ideas. You know, I used to have this board before I created my first startup when I was living in Silicon Valley. I bought a whiteboard at Walmart and I wrote ideation board. What are the ideas? It's not necessarily everything you're going to execute on, but no idea is a bad idea. You do have bad ideas, but theoretically, no idea is a bad idea. And how do you push each other to think beyond the boundaries? We have those conversations as well with our customers, with our partners. And we say, what have you been thinking about? Where do you want to go? And sometimes it's this crazy idea that like can't happen. Well, how do you know? I had a conversation yesterday around a number of topics with a 100-unit brand that does significant volume on where they want to head over the next 5 years of innovation. Like, I don't think this is possible, but this is what I would love to have. They don't know how to solve it, but they know kind of the problem they have, and they don't necessarily know how to get there. And we can help fill that gap and kind of work together.
And you also know where to go on the outside resources as well to bring them all together.
How do you bring the different partners together?
Because you bring some of those new, so I mean, you know this firsthand. You bring some of those other newer technologies together that are out there in the industry, but they don't speak the industry language.
Yeah.
And so somebody's got to bring that together, translate it, and make it work within the industry.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes, you know, because I've been in the startup world, I advise startups. I guest lectured across a number of different prestigious universities, you know, throughout Boston. I've judged on panels. You know, you usually have a lot of tech people trying to solve in the restaurant space, and they don't quite know how to make it work because the restaurant space is really
Everybody
unique.
wants to be in the restaurant
Yeah,
space.
I mean, look, everybody has to eat at the end of the day, right?
Everybody eats.
Everybody eats. I love food. People love food. And honestly, if you think about the different places you travel around the world, the food that you eat and what you experience, even on a neighborhood basis, really shapes and shapes how you feel emotionally. And I think kind of food is like kind of the way to the soul of a particular area. But how do you kind of bridge the gap of like, you know, the technology component to actually working within the four walls or outside the four walls of a restaurant? And, you know, I love those conversations. And the beauty of our platform is we can bring those to life incredibly fast at, you know, an accelerated pace.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many different pieces. You know, there is one thing though. It occurs to me, you know, your CEO came from the payments industry, and when you think about data security and things, by the way, I am constantly seeing new point of sale companies pop up. Somebody built it. You know, they built it from AI. I don't know. They're just building these things, right? But I think we're also forgetting the whole, amount of the card transactions, the payment, the employees, you know, everything that goes along with that, and actually understanding, data security and how that, restaurateurs aren't always thinking that way. Maybe when you're really big, you got, somebody who's the chief security officer or whatever in there, but they're not. And somebody's got to look out for them on that too.
Security is huge, right? So across the stack. So how does the technology work from the point of sale to the gateway to the processor and up and down the stack, and tying in with loyalty and PCI compliance as well? So we can handle the entire life cycle. So we have our own processing engine. We are the gateway as well. And what do you get with that? You get a tremendous amount of future technology, future-proofing on people trying to hack, right? But also the data that comes along.
You need that because people decide overnight to put something in.
Absolutely, right? But you also want to have that data transaction history. You want to understand the data behind the transaction that you can then feed your marketing department. Who are your loyal customers? What are the par values that's associated with that? What are the analytics that come out of the Visa transactions that you have? So I think there's a tremendous amount of powerful analytics that you can use for marketing that people don't think about when it comes to the payment side of the business. And the other thing with microservices, and I know it's a super technical term, but it's a zero trust system. So if you think about it, if rather than having one monolithic point of sale on an Android system, imagine if every single one is an independent little application like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. They're hardened. They can't kind of cross, connect, and touch, and you're isolating those. So from any threats that might get within your system, they're hardened and closed off, so they don't kind of infiltrate each other.
So I got to tell you something. I'm going to just share with you something, but don't tell your counterparts about this.
No, I won't.
Okay.
I won't.
So here's the deal.
Don't watch counterparts.
No. So here's the deal. So a year ago, here at RLC, I sat in this room that we're in right now and had a briefing. And every which way, the words were being given to me, a platform, this, that, the other thing. And I'm like, okay, I get what you want to do, but nobody's ever going to understand that. And I think you just actually, the analogy that you just used is simple understanding. I can understand if I have my phone and I have Facebook and I got Twitter on there and I got my email and I got all these other things on there. The concept of the micro piece in here and how they fit together and how they have to layer and work together and the security, I think you actually just explained it really well. I know we have to use the word platform, but in reality, it's the platform on which all of these micro pieces sit and they fit together, and you have to bring them together.
But like, what do you think? So you've obviously been around the industry a long time.
Are we switching the interview here?
A little bit. I
have this conversation.
Because you're an expert in this space, right? Like, if you're a brand out there, whether you're 100 units or 1,000 units or 50 units, like, why would you tell them to have a conversation with NCR Voyix?
Well, first of all, there's a number of reasons. I believe that people are scaling very quickly today, and I don't think that they have any idea how many things are really involved, because we might have built systems before and maybe you bought from 4 different people. Maybe you had a loyalty app, you had your point of sale for sure, maybe you had a back office inventory ordering, whatever it is, right? And you have labor scheduling, right? So I'm probably missing something in there, but let's say those are the big ones that you need to operate. That is not the case today because we are constantly being hit up with the micro apps that are out there that do every little thing. And those costs are building up and they're not getting integrated sometimes. And when I think, by the way, of the voyage of the online ordering, how many years ago was it that we had like 6 tablets sitting out there until one person got the idea, can we get them all on one tablet? Because there's still a dozen different ordering systems. And if you're in a local city, there's going to be somebody who's doing that. Well, you might know a little bit about that, right? Because you were bringing people together in a city. So I think that the idea of working with somebody who actually is experienced, understands that there are all these different parts and pieces, and has truly built a platform that doesn't have to all be their own stuff sitting on it and can bring those pieces together, I think makes a difference.
And you mentioned one thing actually I want to bring up is digital ordering. Digital ordering channels, a lot of brands you see want to accelerate, say maybe you're at 5%, you want to go to 10, you're at 10, you want to go to 30. How do you increase that? The great thing with our system and our platform and integrations, both in store and above store, is that can all feed directly into our point of sale. It can directly feed into the KDS as well, the kitchen display system, which is huge. Your kitchen orchestration, your routing rules. Maybe you have multiple make lines, but in off-peak you have one make line. So we can flex between make lines and expos, which is incredibly unique. Throttling, timing. We can integrate all those different channels into one unified commerce platform so that it's very simple for you to view from analytics, but also within the operation to run inside the store, which I think is incredibly powerful.
Yeah, by the way, I will tell you that I've had a tour right after they opened up the building, and I've been to various parts of the building there. But one of the most fun things I had was going in the innovation lab there. I don't know who the guy was. I think he was from maybe Sweden or something. I forget where he was from, but he was Nordic country, right? And this guy was great. And, what we were looking at in that room, because it was great to walk in there, is sort of like, let's try this, let's try that and put it together. Because you mentioned the KDS, right? And we know what it took to go from tickets hanging online to printers and things to KDS. But the next piece is probably going to be some sort of vision thing with glasses, or maybe not glasses. I don't know.
Well, but, we're already working on stuff where if we had a pizza brand come by, they have a buffet, and they said, hey, I have 8 slices, but when it gets down to 2, can we auto fire to the kitchen to auto drop on the KDS? So using vision technology, you want to auto fire to the KDS. Now, if you imagine that auto fires to the KDS, it's going into the system, automatically hitting your cost of goods sold. Now you have the top line revenue piece. You're cycling every single component through your back of house and front of house in a complete seamless way.
Well, why aren't we taking the feed that's coming off the surveillance cameras in the dining room? We don't have to identify the people, but if you want to know where they are in the course of the meal or how things are doing,
what if a school bus gets dropped off outside because a football game just ended on a Friday night? You're about to get a massive rush. How do you know what to drop?
But in order to bring all those pieces together, you have to be built on a platform and infrastructure that can tie anything together. One of the things that you mentioned, and you did give us a differentiation between the word legacy and stuff and how people might say, well, on one hand, people say the word Aloha and they say that thing's been there for a while, but there's really the next generation, right? So where does Aloha actually go?
So, our next generation point of sale is, I think, naturally named Aloha Next. It's based on our edge infrastructure, microservices. But what does that mean? It is a complete, redundant, cloud-managed point of sale that can still run locally on your hardware from a server-based component. So you have full offline mode of redundancy without having a rack in the back. But the thing I love about it, to simplify, is that UI that you see on your terminal. Think of it as a blank canvas. You can make your receipts on your left, you can make it the right, you can make it in the middle, can have images, no images. You can customize that point of sale to be anything you want it to be. And we're leveraging AI throughout the entire code base, leveraging our 140 years of history.
Make it easy to use.
Or the back end. It's incredibly easy to use next-gen point of sale that is going to keep you up all the time, that no other player can compete with. So I'm really excited about Aloha Next, and you should reach out to see a demo because it's going to change the game.
No, we will, and we'll look forward to seeing what's next on that one. Well, listen, last question for you. Yeah. So you came on a year. Now, I got to tell you that since the very beginning, NCR, then NCR Voyix, has been, really in a leadership position as a global member of the IFBTA, now a leadership member of the IFBTA, which really is the top that we have to offer, right?
Yeah. I think your expertise in understanding the industry, you kind of know the heartbeat of the industry, you know kind of trends and where things are happening, what people are looking for. I think the simplicity aspect of translating super technical terms to simplifying those, the relationships you have, the introductions, the conversations you have, the ideas, right? We've talked a lot of different aspects of activation and ideas and pulling a lot of different people together. At the end of the day, how do you have really great conversations? Whether somebody's going to buy something or not, I think is secondary. But how do you get a lot of really great people in the room to have accelerated conversations around futuristic ideas, right? And I think a lot of different chapter meetings you have, the dinners you have around the country, also
it's no one size fits all, right?
It's hard, right? People think these things are easy. These things are very difficult. Get on people's calendars, pull people together, and have these types of conversations. And I think you guys are just really great people.
Well, we appreciate that, and I think that as partners and in a partnership, it mutually is beneficial for the industry itself because we're able to share and do those ideas. So, listen, I really, Nick Belsito, Vice President of Sales for NCR Voyix, and I really want to thank you for sort of sharing your vision, but even more so, just the conversation. Because it's just a lot of fun to have a conversation, right?
No, I love it.
So, thank you for coming on, and we really appreciate, NCR Voyix's support and taking really the top position that we have, in industry leadership globally. So,
I appreciate the partnership at IFBTA. You guys have been amazing, and looking forward to years to come. So, thanks, Rob.
Thank you.
Awesome.